I have a feeling the haters will especially hate this one. Disclaimer, please go back and watch a few of my latest videos. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible about the setup of my dyno. And I've checked and double checked everything more than 10 times now. The inertias, the rotational inertias, the coast down run, the numbers, everything. I'm really trying to make things as accurate as possible. And if it was the case that I was trying to trick you with trick numbers, higher numbers than actual numbers, keep in mind I've been doing this for, well, I've been documenting for, is it 7 years now? And this is the first time we've had a proper success. So you'd think I'd trick the numbers a little earlier if that was my goal, to show high numbers, not get anywhere, but just show high numbers. The numbers are correct. There's nothing wrong here. Welcome back to my garage. 50cc 2-stroke on methanol and nitromethane, meant for my land speed bike. Currently we're seeing 25.3 horsepower on the dyno. That's with a 2.5mm main jet and 26 degrees of ignition advance at 16,000 RPM, which is close to peak power. Advance could be too much. Fuel could be, it's definitely not too much. Looking at the plug, well, it's installed now, but it's undecisive what the plug says. We're gonna add fuel and see if we gain power or if power stays the same. If we gain power, we'll go higher. If power stays the same, we'll still go higher, just to see where the limit is. I want to give it as much fuel as possible without losing power. Before we play more with ignition timing and before we start adding compression, I'm gonna either machine some heads, or actually I think JLC PCB will make some heads for me, inserts. So last time we drilled a jet out to 2.5mm. Now we're gonna drill one out to 3. This might take us into being restricted by the needle in the metering circuit versus being main jet restricted. If so, we'll have to modify that needle a little bit. And I am deburring the jets after drilling. And I know it's not the most accurate way of sizing a jet, but it's accurate enough for this fuel. It's not as finicky as gas. Just checking that it's not hydro locked. The plug has been sitting. Might be we'll have to pull the plug and clean it. We'll see if it starts without doing that first. Started at 25.6 at 16,000, then went to 26.16 at 16,200, and then dropped down to 25.46 at 16 again, misfiring up top. There's misfires up top there on all the runs. The plug looks safer than with the 2.5mm main jet, so it definitely made a difference. I'm gonna bring it in closer, but what I think happened here was, because it was acting just as when the plug starts melting and we're losing ignition, so it's breaking up. That's happened to this plug, and well, this plug. No. Well, doesn't matter. Every time when the plug has started melting, we've had the behavior we had here. So I think what happened was we started gaining some heat in the engine and we started gaining more power, and then the combustion pressure blew out our spark because we didn't gap the plug. Let me bring you in close. This is what the plug looks like now. You can see the mark is about there. And that should indicate we can add more ignition timing and bring it closer to here. And that's probably because the richer mixture now is burning slower, I think. You can also see how the heat hasn't traveled down the side of this part of the plug at all. And now this half is bluish, but this half is more brownish. There's a little brownish there too, whatever that means. Lower temperature, probably. Probably meant to be 0.7. Yeah, 0.7. I'm gonna smash this down to 0.3 again. 0.3. See how it behaves. The results are in, but they're strange. If you look at this is one of the previous runs, and you can see how the engine RPM graph is what you'd expect. Like it's a little bumpy, but that's reflected in roller RPM. But then look at these runs. Look at how engine RPM is just a sawtooth pattern. And same with this one, and same with this one. So obviously something noise related happened when I closed the gap from 0.7 to 0.3 millimeters now. That hasn't happened before with that kind of gap. But now we're running richer. Now I would think a larger gap would create higher voltage and more interference. But maybe it could be this is fouling as the gap is small. So it's now fouling, liquid is fouling the gap. And that's what's going on here, where spark is just dropping in and out. And I think we want to lock the gear ratio now, not rely on the input from the Ignitec for engine RPM. I was curious because it said everything was shifted to like 17.5 now. And I was curious to, maybe that was the plug causing it to rev higher because it was firing at higher RPM, but I don't think it's the case. Could be, but well, it could be the case. I was packing up here and I realized I can just use one of the good runs without all the interference and check the gear ratio. It's a little bit shifty between 10 and 9.5, but it seemed like most of the numbers gave like 9.6. So I set the gear ratio to, I locked the gear ratio at 9.6, and then I reran the runs. That's the beauty with your dyno, the your dyno software, where you can, it's login raw data, so you can change the run conditions and redo the runs. It is actually revving higher, and it's actually making power for longer. So it seems like the smaller plug gap makes. Let me stop myself there before we go any further. I went deeper into the investigation of what happened after we closed the gap of the spark plug. So this is the third run we did yesterday before closing that gap. And you can see, and I reran that run with just the raw data, no smoothing. And you can see here how it's hard to see, but it's just pretty much covering the lines. So pretty good. There's some noise here, but pretty good. That's with 2 in smoothing out of 10. Now let's see what happens with the second run we did after closing the gap. That's our raw data. So obviously closing that gap after richening the mixture made the spark plug, well, the ignition system not behave anymore, and we got this kind of little misfires probably, because probably the fuel fouling the gap there and having it not fire. Okay. What I'm doing here is I've removed the bits making this do its job. I'll explain why in a little second here. Now whatever the RPM, this won't move at all. Like it'll stay just locked at the in first gear. Now I'm gonna space this out a little bit so that first gear is a little bit higher. What? Okay, so that'll put it in some gear. The gear ratio is variable because of the radiator a little bit. It's locked, but wasn't really locked. You saw what I did there. I locked it out completely. Because what was going on here was we started with around 11:1 in gear ratio, and we ended up at closer to, well, 8.7. This doesn't matter for the power numbers because we're running versus RPM and we're using that sensor. So the power numbers are correct. The curve isn't though. It's more stretched out than what it should be. So the numbers looks like the power spread looks wider than it is. We're variating a little bit, and especially up top here, where up top the engine is slowly rising from 16 to 17,000 RPM. But if I use a locked gear ratio like I did, the dyno think it's climbing to over 19,000 RPM, which isn't correct. Also explains why it's easy to take off even though it's below the power band, and I can still pull through and up to 2,000 roller RPM. I'm gonna put in a new plug with just a stock gap, and we're gonna do 3 runs. See how it behaves. Hopefully the ignition system is back to normal again. And I've made sure the wheel is always staying at 3 bars of pressure. Forgot to mention that earlier. That's what I used for the coast down run, and that's what I use for every session now. And yes, the clutch must have had an effect during the coast down run, even though it was disengaged. There's still friction in there, so a little bit. So let's call it crank horsepower then. Belt loss equalizes clutch loss in neutral. Belt loss is probably much higher, but just to be conservative again. And my fuel is from this half full plastic container that's been sitting for several years in this humid garage. That probably has an effect too, just to be even more transparent. That probably doesn't contribute to good numbers. Or maybe the water content does, I don't know. We have a problem, it's slipping. So we need much more tension here. So that won't work. I need to use normal nuts and no washers and super short bolts. Clearance is clearance, clearance. I'm using 4 of the springs versus 6 because this is meant for much higher torque than my engine can produce, and this is much easier on that pushrod thing we had troubles with. I haven't had any trouble with it after going down to 4 springs. Forgot the nut. That. Loctite. Lots of Loctite. Forgot to put this in, so I'll have to disassemble the clutch again and clean this up and apply a tiny little bit of Loctite here just to be on the safe side. I'll go a little tighter. I don't want to go too tight on this. That's the tight spot. Okay, I think we're good there. Hoping the 4140 sprocket holds up without hardening. We'll see. It's tough stuff. But is it tough enough? Okay, let's see how it behaves. This will probably give us a slight difference. How much? I don't know, if any. We should see numbers close to the ones we had earlier before it started misfiring and all that. So, well, let's see how it behaves. Retard. The same stupid mistakes over and over again. I even thought about it, like, do it in the correct order now. But the correct order is not enough. The turn also has to be in here. Okay, correct order again. We're seeing pretty much the same numbers, 25.72. For some reason, I only got the first and second run recorded. I gotta watch the screen recording and see what happened there. Might be something with my hotkeys. The ignition system is not coping too well, I think. I think what I want to do now is add a little more timing, 5 degrees more, and see how it behaves. Lots of timing shouldn't be too dangerous with this fuel because it's so detonation resistant. It's not like pre-ignition is the problem. If something starts glowing, then we have a problem. Could be we have a problem with too much timing too. We'll see what happens. Add 5 degrees more. Last time we added 5 degrees, we gained, I don't know, 3 horsepower or something like that. I'm not sure if we gained anything. And this time too, I lost one run this time too. Something weird going on. Anyways, we saw 26.6, we saw 26.09 and 26.6 horsepower at slightly higher RPM than the previous run. Pink-purple run, that's before we switched to the chain and sprocket drive. What's interesting is how adding 5 more degrees at ignition timing at peak power didn't affect things much, and it affected things in a weird way where we gained more RPM, it seems, and that doesn't make sense. Usually it's the other way around. If you pull out timing, it'll rev higher. I'm not sure what's up with that. I'm starting to think the Ignitec unit does not want to, that it can't do this much timing at this high RPM. The plug looks fine. The timing mark, what I think is the timing mark, is in the bend, which is like optimal. People say that's optimal. And it's halfway kind of bluish, halfway kind of yellowish burnt. There's a little bit of heat down into the threads now, but there's no sign of melting. Remove the main jet completely, do a run, and see how it behaves. You notice how on every run, as we were traveling through the power band, we lost RPM signal, or it started saying like 30,000 RPM. Luckily, with the chain drive now, I have the fixed ratio, so I plugged that's 7.75. 7.85 is the fixed ratio now. You can see how it's drifting a little bit, but you can see 7.8. 7.86, so I said 7.85 as an average there. 29.75-ish horsepower now. 29.78, 29.74. That's close to 30. That's 30 at the crank, definitely. Let's call this crank horsepower. But then the chain, this is, we're at 30 horsepower at the crank now. So it's the most powerful, this is the most powerful 50cc two-stroke engine now. It's on methanol and nitro, there's more in there. We need to give it even more fuel. We need to give it even more fuel. I don't want to destroy the engine today. Tomorrow I might, but now I want to... This is 30 at the crank. 30 horsepower at the crank. Probably more. 29.75 measured at that sprocket, output sprocket. Wow. It's getting better. It's getting better. Add fuel, add timing, add fuel. It's insane. Wonder what the plug looked. Well, now the plug has been... I'm going to buy some more plugs. Go buy some more plugs and more celebrate. Thanks for watching.